I don't know if you consider 25 skills that you can learn with little to no land is a lot or not, but there are actually more. I'm just sort of giving some of the ones that I'm more familiar with. There are so many skills that you can learn and so many things that you can do without land or very little lands. This is the Homesteading for Beginners podcast, and I'm Mona Weathers, your host. If you are desiring to start a homestead, or if you already have started your homestead and you just want it to be sustainable and long lasting, then this is the podcast for you. So I encourage you to listen to today's podcast episode because I will be talking to you about 25 ways that you can start your homesteading journey with little to no land. If you're ready to get started on your homesteading journey, but you don't know where to begin, be sure to get the Homesteading for Beginners checklist by going to healthyhomesteading.com/checklist. So we're going to go through the entire list. I will interject and share some of my experiences with those things that I do know about. But I just want you to really just think about what is available around you with what you have, and just think about whether you can start one of these skills or more than one of them and learn how to be more self-sufficient, more sustainable, live a more sustainable life with these skills. So here we go. Number one, of course, is gardening. You do not need very much land, or any land for that matter, to start a garden. Many people have started their gardening journey on balconies in apartment buildings, on top of apartment buildings, in community gardens that they do not own. So there are so many ways to learn how to grow food, and I am just a firm believer in get started as soon as possible, because the skill of learning how to grow food is really the most important part. It's not that you're very successful year one in your growing food journey, but it is important that you start that process so that you know what to do and what not to do. And, everything that you learn takes time. So start now. So gardening is one of the least expensive things that you can start with. So I highly recommend that you do that and just keep working at it. If you feel like you're a black thumb, listen to my episode on turning your black thumb green, and I will link that in the show notes. Number two is composting or vermicomposting. There's different types of ways to compost, but there's the type of where you have scraps or manure that you're piling and churning. Some composts, some animal manure needs to age and have plenty of time to decompose to be safe for your garden. But there are other things like vermicomposting. It's worm farming, worm composting. It is an excellent way for you to get started in a small space. It requires very little to startup costs to get started. And, I have a whole episode on that as well. It's with Natalie from Hey, It's a Good Life. And she has, we talk about vermicomposting, also being able to monetize that as well. So check out that episode, which I will have that linked in the show notes as well. Number three is preserving food. When you garden, you tend to have a lot of extra food, and you need to know how to preserve that. There's a full episode with Melissa K. Norris on that as well. There's 9 different ways that she covers on learning how to preserve the food that you grow. You can preserve food that you buy. You don't have to grow it to learn how to preserve it. You can buy it as well. So check out that episode with Melissa K. Norris. That will also be linked in the description or show notes. Seed saving. Seed saving is an excellent way to save money and to continue your growing journey of, having a garden. Using seeds that you've purchased is far cheaper than using plants that you purchase, but using seeds that you've grown from your own plants is cheaper using seeds that you have to purchase, right? So it's really a good idea to learn what things are easier to save, because there are some things that are not as easy to save, and they don't tend to be the original produce. So for instance, squash is one that cross-pollinates a lot. And if you try to grow squash the next year, it may not turn into the same squash that you grew the previous year. So there's certain things that, you need to know about seed saving. So it is a skill to learn. It's not just plucking off the seeds and using them. You can save tomato seeds. You can save all sorts of seeds. Herbs are really easy to save. So just know how to do that. Knowing how to do that will save you a lot of money. It's a lot more fulfilling too if you know that you've used the seeds that you saved from your previous year's garden. And so learn that skill. Number 5 is animal husbandry. Now, you do not need to have land to learn how to take care of animals. And let me explain. If you want to own animals, especially large livestock, you do need land. You don't need as much for certain animals as you may think. For instance, goats can actually be in smaller spaces and they do really well, especially dairy goats. So you don't need a lot of land for some animals. You will for, let's say, cows, but there are miniature cows that need less land than full-size cows. But knowing what you need for each animal is not really what I'm talking about here. It's more that you can learn how to take care of different types of animals without owning those animals. Okay. So, how you would do this is by helping another homesteader or a farmer. You can do that either for pay or for an exchange for something. That's just one way. You can start learning in book form. I'm a firm believer in learning as much as you can through your education. Then use the education that you learned and go to someone who has experience and learn more from them. So animal husbandry is an excellent way to, build your skills, and you can do it before you even have land. Okay. So just remember that. And if you are in a small space, you can't, like I said before, you can own certain animals with a very small space. You can own quail in a very small space. You can own chickens in small spaces and fish. For instance, there is aquaponics that you can learn, and I'll get to that as well. But animal husbandry is a really good skill to learn. Okay, so the next ones are in the kitchen. Okay, so you can learn bread making is another one. So cheese making is another one. Bread making, cheese making, I've done both. I've never really got like amazing at either, but I've made my own, sourdough bread, cheese, goat cheese. I wasn't really fond of goat cheese except for a few different varieties that didn't taste goaty, if that makes sense to you. I used to make like a cream cheese out of the fresh raw milk and some of the other soft cheeses as well. So yeah, so cheese making is number 6. Number 7 is bread making. Number 8 would be cooking from scratch. Cooking from scratch is technically what you're doing with the cheese making and the bread making, but what I'm more talking about in this case is cooking your dinners and your meals from scratch. You might be someone who's used to cooking from boxed things, and cooking from scratch might be a big thing for you. So, that is a skill. Learning how to cook from scratch, taking the produce from your garden and learning what to do with it and cook from it, as well as the, meats that you might raise or whatever that is. Okay. So cooking from scratch is I think I said number 8. Okay. Number 9 is foraging. Okay, this requires land, but it doesn't require your land. So if you learn how to forage, you can find mushrooms, you can find berries, you can find all sorts of things depending on where you live in, the surrounding areas. I highly recommend you learn from people who know how to do this, so that you're not like harvesting poisonous mushrooms or berries. So make sure that you know what you are foraging. There is a really neat app, but this is also, again, make sure that you are sure that it is the food that you are looking at and not mistaken for something else. But there's a good app called Plant This, and there's a free version as well. So if you want to check that out, and it'll identify plants for you. But if you're eating them, remember to, make double sure that that is what it is that you are harvesting. So along those lines is hunting and fishing as well. So that's number 9. No, 10. That's number 10. Hunting and fishing. So again, it may not be your own land, but if you have, get a hunting license and a fishing license, and you're able to use that as a skill without having to have it on your own land. So hunting and fishing. Number 11 is herbalism, knowing what you can do with the things that you have in the garden, the herbs that you have. There's so many things, and there's so many educated people online. I will be having an interview soon with an herbalist, so stay tuned for that. But I just want to make sure that you know how powerful herbs can be, and diving into that part of your gardening journey is really going to take you on a whole other direction, but it's going to be good. Number 12, hopefully I didn't skip some numbers because I had to do some things, but number 12 is soap making. A lot of people, especially if you have dairy goats, it's a good skill to learn. But you can do other types of soap, lye soap that doesn't require milk, or, there's all kinds of soaps. There's glycerin soap, but just knowing how to make your own soap is really important, especially since you want to remain clean. And it's something that will allow you not to have to purchase soap from the store. And it's usually probably way more healthier than what you get from the store. I've lost count of my numbers, so we're just going to go with the rest of the things, but believe me, this is all 25 things. So the next one is welding. Welding is a skill that can provide so many things for you, especially if you like to build, and you don't need a whole lot of land to weld unless you have like large projects, of course. I don't really have any experience with this, and my husband welded a little bit in high school, but we don't have a welding machine. Welding torch, is that what you call it? But we want to one day add that to our homesteading skill set. And so along those lines also is carpentry. You can learn how to build and install things into your own home, on your own homestead, or build barns or whatever it is. So I highly recommend you learn is basic carpentry skills. It's something that I want to dive more into. My husband is really great at it, but basic carpentry skills is a really great skill to learn. And next is beekeeping. Beekeeping is so wonderful. I have been wanting to start beekeeping for many years, and I haven't because I felt it was more difficult in the state that I was in before, which was California. It's way easier here, but I've shifted on how I want to approach that. And there's an episode with my friend Adam Martin, who is a natural sustainable beekeeper. It's a episode about community, and I'll link this as well. It's an episode about community, but I will be interviewing him again to talk about actually the whole natural beekeeping. So if you want to check that out as well. So the next will be food and budget planning. This is a skill that will keep you from spending too much, and it will help you get out of debt. So I highly recommend you do that. I wish I had done more of that in the beginning of our journey. I wish I had been more aware of what was happening with the spending and, budgeting that. But, you live and you learn. So I highly recommend you, get a budget, a food budget, and a farm budget, and get that going, especially before you own land and the animals. If you get that started and learning how to manage your money well, then it will be a lot easier when you have all of the animals, if that's your desire. Another one I have no experience with, but I really am intrigued by this, is natural dyeing. I would love to be able to dye my own clothes. There's some beautiful things online you can see on Instagram. I follow somebody, I can't remember the name of her. I'll link that as well. But there's some beautiful creations that you can make, beautiful clothing that you can make, aprons out of natural dyes that are used from plants, mostly flowers, and they just create this beautiful, art on your clothing, and you didn't have to go out and buy any dyes. So that's a really good skill to learn as well. Aquaponics would be the next one. Again, I don't have any experience with this, but I've been intrigued by this one as well. I've wanted to start my own aquaponics area in our garden, and maybe one day I will, but that is a really one. If you're not familiar with that, it is using fish. Usually it's like tilapia fish to create a place where it feeds your plants. So the fish feed the plants and the plants feed the fish, Well, I don't think the plants feed the fish. Maybe they do in some way through the roots. I'm not sure. Again, I don't know this one, but that is a great one to learn. And if you are familiar with that, I don't have any links or anything for that, but that's a great one to learn because you don't need a whole lot of space and you can feed your plants as well. The next one is home healthcare. Now, I did have Dr. Amber Belt, she's a naturopathic doctor, talk about how to have self-sufficient health and how to use the things that you can have in your own home to help you when there are problems or to help prevent some illnesses and help recover from some illnesses. So that's a great episode to check out, and I'll link that one as well. Home butchery is another way, another skill for you to learn with little to no land. We've butchered lots of chickens, mostly chickens and ducks and turkeys. So we haven't really done much past that, but learning the skill of home butchering is really important for those of you who have animals and choose to do that. Yeah, I just highly recommend that one because that's a takes some time to get to learn and to know how to do quickly. We were at the point where we were processing 25 or so at a time. We would have community events a lot of times where multiple families were processing chickens at the same time. So there's all sorts of things that you can learn. There are different ways that you can do it. So if you have little to no land, I would recommend, and you can't grow your own chickens, I would recommend finding someone else who's doing one of those processing of their own chickens or whatever animal, and visit them and learn from them hands-on, because that is really the best way to learn this skill. Another one is growing fodder. Now, fodder is feed that you can give your animals that's outside of grains and bagged feed. So it would be like growing, well, let me tell you, a natural fodder that we have here in Georgia. Natural fodder for our chickens is kudzu. So if you're not familiar with kudzu, it's a very invasive plant and it's really hard to get rid of. But I guess goats is the best way to get rid of them because they'll chew it all the way down. It's an edible plant. People can eat it as well. But chickens really like it. So a natural fodder that grows around our property is that. You can give them grass. But you can actually, if you don't have your own backyard or large area where there is fodder, natural fodder is growing, you can grow certain things that can feed your animals. So you can grow in like trays and grow different grasses and things that you can feed your animals, which brings me also to growing microgreens. So some fodder could be growing microgreens for your chickens and animals. So that's the next one, is growing microgreens. And I do have an episode on how to grow microgreens with Laura Patterson. So I will link that as well. The next one is homeschooling. Now, I don't know if you've heard of my experience with homeschooling, but I homeschooled for 25 years. It sounds like such a big number. I homeschooled my oldest daughter from the time she was 4 until she graduated high school. There was a little bit of where she went to a high school co-op at the end, but she, homeschooled all the way through, and so did my youngest daughter. So my youngest daughter just graduated last year. But homeschooling, for a lot of families tend to want to do that. And I feel like that is a homesteading skill because, a lot of times we're out and farther away from other things, and you want to, keep your family together and teach them through the farm or farm life as well. So you don't have to homeschool. Definitely, a lot of people are homesteading and not homeschooling, and that's completely fine. It's just up to you. But I just put that one on the list because I feel like that was a big part of my homesteading journey, was my homeschooling of my children. And then number 20, well, now we're towards the end, so I guess this is number 24. I'm not sure. Hopefully this is 25. You can count them and tell me if I'm wrong. But this one kind of goes along with the carpentry. There's woodworking. Or did I already say woodworking? I think I already said woodworking, but woodworking is another one, okay? So obviously my notes are not really great this time, but oh well. And then number 25, the last one, is permaculture design. Now, being able to know how to design your property to best provide food, but also to be able to have the whole property like holistically make sense. Having the things that need to be in the right place, things that are companions to each other, and things that'll shade the other plants during the times that it's in the most heat. I mean, there's just all sorts of information about permaculture that it's still something I am still pursuing. I do have an episode on that with Larry Wheeler. He has his own homestead, but he also studied permaculture design. He's a friend of mine. So you can check out that episode as well. I will link that as well. So that is all 25, I believe. I think I did 25. If I didn't, I'm sorry. I will add another one after this recording if I missed one. But anyway, this was fun for me. I hope it was fun for you. There's so many things that you can learn. So I highly recommend you pursue your homesteading goals, whether you have land or not, and just learn the skills, because really homesteading is about skill building. It's about building a set of skills that allow you to be more self-sufficient and sustainable, and to help your community and to contribute to your community. If you are listening on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. If you are listening on a podcast player, follow the podcast and leave me a 5-star review. I would really appreciate that. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check the show notes or description for the links that are mentioned in this episode. And I hope you keep your dreams alive and keep working towards your homesteading goals.